Welcome. You're tuned in to the We Are All Artists podcast, a space where we talk about living life as a conscious creative. I'm your host, Adriana Douglas. Our intention is to support you throughout the process of discovering your inner artist and transforming from the inside out. Here in this space, we believe that the way out is through. On the other side is a world with more art, more beauty, and access to more of you. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me today. And now let's begin. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of We Are All Artists. Today I have the fabulous Tash Triana on the show. Tash is a registered nurse turned life and purpose coach. She's also a certified yoga and meditation teacher, Reiki master, hypnotherapist, and holds a master's degree in psychology. Early on in her almost decade of working in the hospital, Tasha experienced severe burnout. While this was an extremely challenging time in her life, it was also enlightening as it helped Tash truly understand the importance and necessity of daily self-care practices and how to implement them in her own life. Her time working in the hospital also enabled her to uncover her true passion for mind, body, and spirit healing and how that contributes to your overall well-being. As she witnessed the power of mindset and belief systems within her patients in the hospital, she was inspired to dive deeper into the power of the mind-body-spirit connection and the power of the subconscious mind. By following her passions, curiosity, and purpose, she was led on her own healing and transformational journey and was ultimately called to step away from the hospital setting to serve and impact the world in a more aligned way. Now, Tash is on a mission to teach and empower others to prioritize the relationship they have with themselves, build self-awareness, and let go of limiting beliefs so that they can live their most authentic and aligned lives. Tasha works with clients one-on-one and in groups, hosts workshops, and leads retreats. In her free time, she's out exploring the world. She loves traveling, getting out in nature, hiking, and eating all the tropical fruit that she can find. I'm so excited for you all to hear this episode today. We dive into what Tash Fridays are and really how you can create your own version of a Tash Friday, what gives you natural energy, when you might feel like you're in obligation energy versus alignment energy, what happens when you experience burnout, how you can prioritize your peace, being intentional with being on and off socials, and how to really connect with your own energy first before going out into the world and connecting with others. I'm so excited to hear from you all after you listen, and I know you'll love this conversation just as much as I did. Talk to you soon. Hi, Tash. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you? Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, thank you for being on the podcast. I'm so excited to have you. Where are you dialing in from today?
I'm in Southern California in Orange County. I would say sunny, but actually today I'm looking out the window. It's not that sunny. It's a rare day.
I'm glad because last time we saw each other, it was, I think, what people call June gloom.
Yes, you're right. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it was like a thick layer of June gloom when we saw each other.
Right. So just for the benefit of listeners, Tash and I met in a group program called, at the time, the Revolutionary Year.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Through Selena Gray.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so much fun, and we got connected there and then have kept in touch ever since, which really shows the power of community and relationship building. So, Tash, I would love for you to give a quick little intro into what you've been up to, maybe something that's inspiring you lately. I know there's something I love that you do called Tash Fridays. I think it'd be a perfect way to start us off.
Yeah, I would love to talk about Tash Friday. Thank you for asking me. So Tash Friday is something that I developed, back in, it was 2019, I remember, because it was right around the time that I did my yoga teacher training. And I was still working in the hospital as a nurse. And I had this vision for my future self. I was at the time growing my business slowly but surely as I was working in the hospital. And I just had remembered hearing a friend talking about she had a therapist who took a day off a week to really nurture herself, replenish herself, and to really come from a more energized place to give back to her clients and her, patients, the people that she worked with. And that always like left an impression in my mind. And as I was really getting clear on who my future self was, the things she did, I thought, I really feel that would serve me having a day like that. And I came from a lot of in my past burnout, overgiving, people pleasing, all the things that, allowed me, I think, in many ways to embody being a nurse as well, like taking on kind of that identity, even in my family, being the caretaker, the helper, the mediator, all these things that served me in some ways and then also didn't in some ways that were limiting me or blocking me out or burning me out. And so I just thought this would be a really cool way to give back to myself. And even though at the time I, was only seeing a couple clients, I didn't yet have this future life. It was something that I really wanted to put in place for myself because my vision really saw that it would be so supportive of me. So I decided, I'm going to keep Fridays available for myself because at the time, even though I was working in the hospital, I had the luxury and freedom to make my own schedule. I had to do a certain amount of shifts in a certain amount of time, but I was able to keep Fridays open. And so I kept it open and I adopted Tash Friday, where it would be time reserved just for myself and an extended chunk of time. So right when I wake up in the morning, till about noon or one, sometimes longer depending on the day, but it's at least until noon. And I don't text anyone, I don't email anyone, I don't, do anything on my phone like Instagram. It's just time for myself. And in the beginning, I'm not going to lie, it felt so weird because it was really just giving undivided attention and time for myself, even though I would self-care on a regular basis. And, I was really consistent with my meditation practice, my morning routine. I was really good at self-care at that point, but it was like me taking it to another level and having this full day for myself. So it did feel really weird. There were moments where I thought, oh, I could call, so and so, or this is a time to check in. And I had to really consciously tell myself, no, no, this is your time. This is your time only. And so what I love about it now, it's like it is my favorite day of the week. Honestly, it's time that I get to look forward to. And I have it reserved in my schedule. Now, most of my friends, my family, my clients, they know that that's my time for myself. And so often they're like, have fun on Tash Friday. So I have it reserved in my calendar. And then either the night before, sometimes the morning of, I decide what do I want to do. So sometimes it's a hike, sometimes it's a mini adventure, sometimes it's sleeping in and doing my own yoga flow or going to a coffee shop and journaling. I just get to choose whatever it is that day that would really fill my soul. So that's Tash Friday.
I love that. You've described the layers of self-care that like you can have your everyday routines, you can have your daily rituals, but this is like the next or it was like a next level growth opportunity where you're like, this is how I'm going to start creating my life. And from that space, because when you leave Tosh Fridays, how do you feel?
Oh, so recharged, so replenished. Really, I mean, usually I feel pretty connected to myself throughout the week, but it's an opportunity to really reconnect, to dive deeper. I just feel so much more aligned and connected to myself, and that goes into everything else I do. And then if we go into like other aspects, of like energetics or even human design, I'm a generator, and by, default, that is someone who's really here to generate and create energy, not just for myself, but for the people around me. And time again, my patients in the hospital, my clients, they would always tell me, wow, your energy is so calming, it's so grounding, or I just feel really good around you. And so it's a reminder that the more I pour into myself, the more I actually am able to be that strength or that support or that empowerment or, enable others on their own path of authenticity. And so, yeah, it's just something that now, as I see the effects of it in real time, it's so powerful.
I love that. And I love that you shared that you're a generator. I also am a generator. And I think that I discounted before I even knew what human design was. I think I discounted just the energy conversation. It wasn't until like maybe 2018 that I went to 5 day in person, like yoga. It was like a yoga workshop thing. It wasn't like it wasn't like a training. And that's when I fully started leaning into this conversation about energy. But something that I'm thinking about as you shared that with the generator energy is like, I remember I wanted to know what it felt like. Feels kind of random, but to bring up, but I wanted to know what it felt like to not have too much caffeine and see what lit me up from there. Cause I felt like I was
Mm.
constantly stimulated
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't really know what my energy felt like. And all of a
Yeah.
sudden, when I tapered off caffeine a little bit, I started to be able to understand, oh, like this thing gives me natural energy. Like what gives me natural energy? And it's something that it's such an easy little, I say easy, it's sometimes really hard to be off caffeine, but an easy avenue. It's like a free avenue to see
Mm-hmm.
where your energy, what, lights you up, what fills up your cup. So I would love to
Mm-hmm.
hear sort of, we just talked about this more micro moment of Tash Fridays and what maybe like the journey of how you started to track your energy levels, coming from like a place of burnout to then not being burnt out. Like, how are you tracking your energy levels? Like, just mental
Yeah.
space.
I,
Like,
I love what you said too about really getting clear on kind of your own energy, because I think that's something that a lot of us don't realize. I was never one to really drink too much caffeine. I never liked coffee until I was in my 30s living in San Francisco, pretty recently. And I did drink kombucha, which is, tea, and it does have caffeine. And I would drink tea. And I really noticed over the course of the pandemic, just the effects more and more kind of the effects that caffeine had on me, especially as we were being, more inward and having less stimulation outside in the external world. And so I really noticed in my body, I'm going to see how I feel without this. And for me, it was pretty easy. I'm kind of like a cold turkey person with a lot of things. I'm just like, nope. And then I really commit to it, which is lucky in some ways, not everything, but with that, it was easy for me to kind of let it go. And I really noticed a big effect in my energy and just my groundedness and my body, my nervous system. It felt more regulated. I already felt pretty grounded, but once I went off, the caffeine like that, it really allowed me to tap in even more. But in terms of the more of the energetics and burnout, I mean, like you said, there's so many directions we can go in. But one thing I think is interesting, kind of touching on both of us being generators as well, and something that now is a place I operate from and still can feel challenging, because before I say I was like a very type A, go getter, high achiever, high performer. If you put a goal in front of me, I'll knock it out, with whether it's career, travel, all sorts of things. I would just really love to kind of hit that goal and then move forward. And what I realized through a lot of my own work and my own journey is that I often came from a place of obligation versus alignment. And obligation, I think that, I mean, there's a lot I can go into there, even like some of my cultural background and different things that I was brought up with, certain mindsets or certain belief systems. But obligation often can be linked to people pleasing. And as I mentioned, that's an area of my life that I've done a lot of work on too. And obligation can often lead to resentment. And resentment energetically is one of the heaviest energies we can carry. Because if you think of resentment, even when I think of it, I already want to like get heavy in my shoulders. I'm like sinking down just by saying the word. And so I invite anyone out there too, to maybe just observe, have some compassionate curiosity, look at your own life. Is there anywhere where you're feeling resentful? And it's okay, no shame if you are feeling that. It's a perfectly normal feeling to have when we're doing things that might be out of alignment, or when we're overdoing or overgiving, or doing again something from obligation because we think we should, in quotes. And just looking and seeing, because from that point it's an indicator and it's our body kind of communicating to us, and from that point of awareness we're then able to shift. And of course, in life, we're humans, there are certain things we do have to do in order to live this 3D life. But how can we move away from obligation as much as possible? And that's something too that I think it's starting to get discussed more in the realm of burnout, but the energetic misalignment piece is huge in terms of burnout. And so that I think is a big piece there too.
I'm just taking that in. That is some powerful is a powerful perspective with just bringing up obligation because yeah, when you feel like you have to do something that you feel like you almost like, at least in a way, the way that I am receiving that is like also like you feel like you don't have the choice. And so something that you and I have talked about a lot, right, is creating your life. What would your future self do? And so like sometimes when that obligation energy is present, you're like, I feel like I can't create. Like my creative
Mm-hmm.
powers have been like kind of taken from me. And how do you take that power back to be like, I can still create even though I know there are certain things I'm obligated to do? How can I then
Mm-hmm.
on another side start to create what I desire to create?
Totally. I have a good example. It's simple and kind of silly, but it's a really powerful one. It makes me think back to a couple of years ago. And of course, often with partnership, we call in partners that are on the other end of the spectrum with us. And my partner, he's a really great example of being a lot more in flow. It's something I've had to really learn over the years. I'm more of like the structure, he's more of the flow, and how can we operate together? And I remember a couple of years ago, I guess it was a couple of years ago, we were in San Francisco and it was a Sunday. And for me, I love having slow Sundays where I sleep in, don't do any technology until maybe later in the day, if at all. And that day we planned to go to the farmer's market, but also we wanted to do a little bit of, tidying and cleaning up. And I was classical me. I'm like, let's do all this stuff first and then have fun. I'm like very trained and like, got to do the hard stuff, then have fun. If we do it the other way, sometimes it still feels like, ooh, in my body. And he's like, why don't we go to the farmer's market first and then do the other stuff? And I was like, all right, let's do it. It's Sunday. Let's focus on the fun. And so we went and we had an amazing time. We ended up like having a picnic and discovering the Spanish store and like buying some snacks and going to Golden Gate Park, which is one of my favorite spots. And my energy was so nurtured and so replenished. And then when we came back, we did the cleaning probably in like a third of the time it would normally take us. It was just like we were like, doo doo doo, just did it quickly. And so that always lives within me, when sometimes I'm wavering even now, because these programming sometimes can run deep and sometimes they come up again, in different layers or in nuanced ways. And so whenever I feel like that obligation come up, I really sit with it when I feel it in my body and kind of ask myself, okay, what would my alignment look like, or what would better serve me and my energy? So that's a little example, as to how we can kind of work with it.
Oh my gosh, thank you for that example. Something that sparked a thought for me on
Mm-hmm.
something that I remember from Catherine Zenkina, some of
Mm-hmm.
her content. I know you've done MBA.
Yeah.
I don't know if this was from a podcast episode or an Instagram caption, but it was like this idea of like it was like a to manifest list instead of a to-do list. And
Mm-hmm.
also where I'm going with this is that concept of like what you mentioned about getting things done quicker. How like
Mm-hmm.
it's not okay. So if you think about an example of like, imagine you need to do, we'll use another simple example, like you're grocery shopping
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, that is some on my to-do list and I need to like
Mm-hmm.
grocery shop and meal prep. And like, if you are on a Sunday, like super low energy, you just want to relax and like connect with yourself. And you're like, I just like, but if you force yourself to go to the grocery store that day, it might take you a few hours. The meal prep kind of might not like be smooth. But if you're like super recharged on Monday and you're like, oh, at 4 p.m. after I'm done with my calls, I'm gonna like do it all in 1 hour. Like it, and
Mm-hmm.
then it gets done like that, and your meal prep is done and your Monday dinner is like amazing. But like you were able to recharge on Sunday, like that matters.
Yes, yeah, and even taking it like a different notch further
Yeah.
in some ways, like prepping food, for example, because everything we put in our body, whether it's food, whether it's words, whether it's content we consume, you're also giving your food as you're preparing it a whole different kind of energy versus like heavy energy. And again, we're energetic beings, and so everything, and it's not to come from a place of fear if you're ever, feeling
Yeah.
off or not in a good mood, because that's okay too.
Yeah.
All emotions are valid,
Absolutely.
but it's just another point for our alignment. And when we come from that place of alignment that feels really good for us, it goes into, again, literally everything we do. And sometimes that's something we're consuming.
I love that you brought up the consuming piece because like it's I feel like sometimes it's overlooked because we just like we're like on information overload like
Mm-hmm.
24/7, whether it's the news, whether it's Instagram. So it's like, how do you protect your peace? Do you have social media boundaries or just consumption boundaries? Whether I mean, or it
Yeah.
could be food. We could talk about this in terms of food, in terms of um content.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that is a great area to dive into. And for me, even because I'm always listening to language, protect our peace versus prioritize our peace. And I love the word
Mm.
prioritize because for me, protect, and yes, sometimes you do have to protect, but it almost means like you're really guarding it, like it might
Yeah.
get taken away. And so
Yeah.
for me, I really love to operate from prioritize my peace because it
Yeah.
even feels differently in my body too.
Yes.
Again, our words have power and we're speaking them out into existence. So for me, a big one, I'll start with the social media piece. I've gone off social media. Like sometimes I'll do breaks. I'll check in with my body. This is where our own self-awareness comes. If something I say resonates, go for it, take it, amazing. And if it doesn't, leave it. It's always about checking in with yourself and what maybe you're like, ooh, when I say something, or you're like, no thanks. And honor that, because we're all different and we're all operating from different places and different spaces. But for me, what I've come to find with social media, again, it's a tool and it has many pros, it has many cons. Everything has a light, everything has a shadow. For me, I really find that my energy is most aligned when I do take intentional time with it and intentional time away from it. And sometimes, of course, like anyone else, I can go down the rabbit hole and I'm like, how was I on here for 1 hour? And I'm looking at the most random thing. I don't know how I got here. And sometimes it's good as a generator where I'm like, I don't know why I'm on this plant Instagram, but maybe I need this knowledge, who knows? So, it's nuanced. But for me, I have a day where I don't go on Instagram. That's every Sunday. But the last couple of months, I felt really called to also be off on Saturday as well. So once Friday rolls around, I really remove my energy from Instagram. And it's been interesting. I mean, I've been off on Sundays for a couple of years now. And like I said, it's more recent that I've gone off on Saturday too. But it's interesting to observe my actions. Sometimes I'll reach for my phone in these like lull moments and I'm like, oh, no, we're not going on Instagram today. But it's interesting to kind of catch how automatic some of these things are, whether it's in line or I'm just sitting and I'll reach for my phone and it's like, no, that's not what we're doing right now. But it's been really nice to energetically recharge myself, because then I also have more focus on the things that really do align me and nurture me and nourish my soul. So usually on the weekends, I find myself even outside more, or connecting with my friends and family in real life, or reading, doing things that really, again, add to my authentic nature and really align my energy. So that's one. And then also in the morning, this has been a really big one for me, a game changer, honestly, since the beginning, even before I burnt out. But it was really noticing that, I mean, I used to be so so phone driven, like many years ago. I'd wake up and the first thing I'd do before I even got out of bed was like check my email, check my messages, check the news, check the weather, every single thing I could like possibly check and need knowledge on. Now I don't look at any messages or anything on my phone. I'll use my phone when I wake up to listen to my own hypno recordings that I've self-recorded for myself. But until I'm done with connecting to my own energy, I won't go into any texting, any messaging, any social media. So that way I'm coming from a place more of creation rather than I feel like you're coming from a place of you're creating and you're going out in the world rather than just being in a reactionary state where you're kind of like, oh, this person responded, let me message back, or this happened, let me respond there. So you're allowing your energy to kind of lead the way.
I love what you shared about being intentionally on and intentionally off, because it sounds like you're so clear. And that also allows, like what you were saying about Tash Fridays too, like your clients, your family, your partner, like everyone knows what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
And that can just create, I was gonna say that can just create really good, I think, co-regulation with folks too. So it sounds like something that I was just thinking about as you were sharing that was, how have you been able to calibrate your nervous system without socials? Because you run a business on socials, right? But you also have offers off social. So I'd be curious to know, like, were you at first when you got off, like, oh my gosh, how's this going to impact my business? Did that come
Yeah.
across your mind?
Yes, definitely. Especially because as a former type A, she still lives within me, the high achiever, the high performer, she still lives within me. But it's really been reprogramming my own subconscious belief system about hard work equals success. And that's a big one. And I'm still unpacking a lot of the layers there and what that truly means and how has that shown up for me in my life. And it has created a lot of success in my life. Hard work equals, success, or whatever goal it is, it's usually gotten me there. But now unpacking that and reprogramming it, now I want success to be filled with more ease and flow. And it doesn't mean there's never work, but how can there be space for both? Before it was just like work, 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 work. There wasn't as much space and opening for the creative energy, for the flow, for the feminine energy. And I'm very intuitive. And so being able to use that in my business. And what's interesting, I'll share a story from Tuesday about how I reprogrammed this further, because yes, I would have to really sit with my nervous system or notice, okay, you're off social. Oh my gosh, am I missing out on something? You kind of get these thoughts popping in my body. I would feel almost like in my chest and shoulder areas, like a little bit shaky energy. That's kind of how sometimes my anxiousness, or when I'm moving into the unfamiliar, territory, it's normal for our bodies to do that because it wants to keep, our subconscious mind wants to keep us safe, which it defines as familiar. So last weekend, the previous weekend, not the one we're coming off of, it was a bit busier of a weekend than I normally have. And so I didn't have as much downtime that I like, and that's okay, got to flow with it. But the next Tuesday, I had some space in my schedule. And so I thought, I'm going to give myself time to like go on a walk and get my nails done, just really give myself that nurturing energy. And even because it was like a random Tuesday, I could tell my mind was like, but should you do that? Can you do that? And I'm like, yes, we can. And I also feel like there's a reason I'm supposed to do this, and really allowing my intuition to lead me. And as I'm on this walk and I'm walking, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw someone, but I didn't really make eye contact with them. And as I passed, someone yells, Tasha. And I look, and it's one of my sister's friends, like her oldest friend, who I haven't seen in gosh, I don't even know, a couple years, more than a couple years. And so we're like, oh my goodness. And so we connected. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's why I was supposed to be on this walk. It was to see her. And then I got a coffee. I went to get my nails done, and I'm sitting there. And again, I hear my name, Tasha. I'm like, what? I look, and it's my sister's friend again. And I'm like, oh my gosh, twice in the same day. And I haven't seen her in years. And so anyway, we were able to talk about hypnotherapy and, different things. And I just really trust more and more, in the flow energy as well, especially from someone who came from such structure. And again, like the obligation, more of that heavy energy, being able to also see things like this pop in, it confirms to my subconscious, like, hey, this actually is a good energy to work from, and things can come out of it. Like I couldn't have predicted that. And now who knows where it will go, but I think that it's a good reminder for me as I'm further stepping away from this old belief system of hard work equals success. So to answer your question, yes, it definitely has taken me and is still taking me, time to regulate my nervous system, and it will pop up in different ways because we're layered and we're complex human beings.
I also had, I still have 1000%
Mm-hmm.
some programming around a phrase that I used to hear a lot was, it's WORK, not FUN. That was like a phrase. And so like
Yeah.
those little phrases, like years later, you're like, why can't I
Yes.
kick this?
They go
And it's
so
like,
deep.
they
Yeah.
go so deep. So hearing what you just shared, I keep thinking about, first of all, like following your flow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like something important to reflect back, is like following the flow and the seasons and trusting in the ebbs and flow. I also
Yes.
have come from that high potential, high achiever. Productivity is taught, is the
King
thing.
or queen. Yeah.
Yeah, king or queen. Like the reprogramming piece was and has been such a game changer for me. I
Mm-hmm.
know we've both had our own hypnotherapy and or hypnosis journey. So I'd love to hear, because you talk about listening to your own hypno recordings. I've never done that, but I've definitely
Mm-hmm.
listened to a ton of hypnosis
Yeah.
audios that like, and had my own hypnotherapy sessions with a guide. And so I'd love to hear how you got into that, because it's so, to me, it's like that's one of my top tools. So I'd love to know.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love the audience to know about that.
Yes, me too. It's one of my top tools, top modalities as well. And I love using it for myself. It's working really well for me. And I love to use it with clients because it's so powerful. And I love that you have had your own experience, and continue to have experiences with hypnotherapy or hypnosis because it's really a powerful tool. And I got into it mainly following my curiosity, which is kind of how I ended up where I am. I'd say, I really followed my curiosity and the things that sparked an interest. I would allow myself to kind of explore it or follow it. And I think there's still a lot of misconception about what hypnosis is. And to kind of paint a picture, I mean, my first experience seeing hypnosis was in high school at grad night. We had a stage hypnosis, hypnotist, and that's not what I do. I remember being there seeing like the football players going on stage doing these crazy things. And I'm like, oh my goodness, please don't hypnotize me. But that's not what I do. So this hypnotherapy that I do is basically a relaxed, focused awareness. And so it works with the subconscious mind, and the subconscious mind is responsible for creating 95% of our reality, which is a whole lot. It's the majority of it, most of it. And I want to share, before I dive even deeper, a quote. I have it written down here by Carl Jung, which I really like. And it says, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And so it's basically, we have this aspect, our subconscious mind, that's here like a program. And most of these programs have been programmed into us from ages 0 to 7. Some research shows up until age 14, and even later in life too, whenever we go through a really emotionally charged event, maybe it's a rock bottom or something really challenging happens, that imprints within us because our subconscious mind, it wants to keep us safe and it wants to conserve energy. And how it keeps us safe is by keeping us in the familiar, because it defines safe as familiar. So anytime we are trying to step outside of what is familiar to us, our subconscious mind is basically alerted, and our whole system, our mind body, try to pull us back into the familiar, even if it's a good change, in quotes, good change. Maybe it's a new partner, a healthy relationship, a new job opportunity, launching your business, moving to a new place that's in alignment, whatever it might be. This is also why people are challenged leaving from toxic relationships or as an example, because it's the familiar, it's the known, and we do not like the unknown. Our system does not like the unknown. And what is an interesting piece too is that our mind has over 60,000 thoughts a day. And out of those, 90% are recycled, which means you're continually repeating certain thoughts. And again, most of them are subconscious or unconscious, means we're not aware of them. So I almost think of it like you have this kind of playlist going on subtly in the background. And so if you have, I'll just use this example, something that is like, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, no one likes me, something like that on repeat in your subconscious mind. When you have thoughts and beliefs on repeat, they lead to feelings in our body, and those feelings allow us to either take action or not take action. And that leads to the results and outcomes you have in your life. And then from an energetic point, our thoughts lead to feelings, which leads to our vibration, which leads to our frequency. And in terms of energy, like frequency attracts like frequency. So we don't actually get the thing we want, we get what we're being. So if we're vibrating at a certain frequency, and say that new job opportunity is at a different frequency of maybe a higher self-worth, we just won't ever match up with that until we change our subconscious patterning, our frequency, and move into alignment with that opportunity or thing, whatever it is we're desiring to create. So for me, I first tapped into my own session right before I fully made the leap from being a registered nurse to working in the space I do now. So being in wellness, doing coaching, leading retreats, doing hypnotherapy, because what I was noticing is I was having trouble. I was feeling a bit stuck with the identity piece because I had been a nurse for so many years, even though I knew that I wouldn't work forever in the hospital. Even from when I was in nursing school, I just had this intuition. I don't know what I'll be doing in the future. I don't think I'll work in the hospital forever, but I don't know what it will be. I was really stuck there because when you think about it, especially in US society, US culture, people always ask what you do. When you travel, when you go to other countries, it's not really like the first question people ask, right? And so when people ask, what are you? I'm a nurse, you get a lot of good feedback. And so I think my ego was a little bit stuck there, like, oh my gosh, what am I going to tell people now? I'm like an entrepreneur. I wasn't quite, in that, my grounding wasn't quite solid yet as I was in this transitional state. I was like, well, I really know the nursing role. the middle feels kind of shaky and I don't really feel myself to be an entrepreneur yet. So I decided to have a hypnotherapist, have a hypnosis session, and she, consulted with me. I told her about my future self, some of the things I was clear on, and then she did a future self hypnosis for me. And I remember it being so powerful. And then she gave the recording to me and told me to start listening to it. So I did listen to it probably 2, 3 times. And then in my mind, I thought, I'm a meditation teacher already. Why don't I just start recording my own? I think it might even be more powerful in my own voice coming from me. And so I started doing that. And I also made it shorter because I know I'm a very committed person, but still having a recording that was like 30, 40 minutes, I wasn't going to be as committed to listening to that every day. So I made it a little bit shorter, more direct. And I listened to that every day. And the things started happening. I started feeling shifted. And then my life was really opening up. My belief systems were changing. And I had already been basically geeking out on the subconscious mind prior, reading things on my own, reading a lot about Joe Dispenza, Dr. Dispenza, who I really love, and this idea that our thoughts really can create our reality and we can create the future we desire. And so then I knew at some point I would get trained formally, and then I did get trained in a hypnotherapy program. And since then, it's been amazing. I use it in groups. I use it one-on-one. I've done it in my retreats, and it's been really powerful. My clients have had really big shifts in all sorts of ways. And it's been really amazing to use it for myself as my own best client, and then to put it out in the world as well.
I'm so inspired listening to that.
Thanks.
It's been so amazing to hear that story just now, because what it brought up for me and what it reminded me of is when I decided that I desired to go into songwriting and music. What you just shared about hypnosis and the subconscious mind and the basically like the same thoughts repeating over and over again, like a background playlist. That is one of the things that I discovered in the songwriting process. So early on, there were a few songs that I had created. And when I finally listened to them back, all of a sudden I was like, this is what I've been experiencing. This is what I've been feeling. Like for me, it was this like shock to the system to actually hear the repeating thought. I was like, this is the programming. This is like the playlist that's been going on. And so like on one side of things, so grateful to like be able to have an artistic expression and create and like release. But on the other hand, I was like, I think so shocked to realize that background playlist that we all have and how it was playing out in different areas of my life. And so to your point of like attracts like, it was like myth busting, the whole opposites attract, the whole like thing. Like it was like, oh my gosh, all of this is in my energy field in some way, shape, or form. And how do I transform it? Not like get rid of it, but transform it. And so the hypnosis, like to clear and reprogram, I think for me, like one, because I was like super in my head and like very intellectual, very mental. Hypnosis was so good for that, because like just going to talk therapy, it was like I was like spinning in circles. And then two, like the reprogramming part, like that was like the shift. It was like, okay, I'm so aware of this background playlist. I'm so aware of these same thoughts, but now how do I reprogram? Because I think sometimes I felt a little disempowered of like, okay, I know I need to like shift this, but like, how do I shift it?
And thanks for sharing. I love that. It's so powerful. And it is, I feel like almost mind blowing when we get these awareness pieces, that we see what has the program been. And sometimes it can feel, I would just want to normalize too, all sorts of feelings and emotions can come up too when we have that awareness. And even grief is a piece I've been talking about a lot lately too, because we think, oh my gosh, wow, this is how my thoughts have been. Or maybe sometimes we want to blame ourselves. But again, I say compassionate curiosity as we dive deeper within ourselves, as we gain these awarenesses, because we are essentially doing the best we could in that moment. Once we have the awareness, then we have the power to change it. And I love what you said too, because I also realized through this process and through my own work that I was a pretty big overthinker. And sometimes I still go there. I'll catch myself and have to interrupt it in the moment. And it's okay. I was running on the program or taking in what I learned as a kid. And it's not also to blame others or blame caregivers or the people you've been around. And sometimes it's even deeper than maybe a thought or a word. You had shared that phrase about work, versus fun. Sometimes it's even a feeling you pick up as a kid. Maybe your caregivers had certain feelings and then you take that on, and it's like an emotion that then maybe creates a thought, because it can go both ways. The feeling can lead to the thought can lead to the feeling. Our system is very, very intelligent, and it's always communicating both directions, body to mind, but mind to body. And so having compassion for ourselves along the way and working with professionals can really help us out as well. And I love that you really allowed yourself to dive in, and see kind of some of these scripts that were playing over and over, and then allowing yourself to say, well, what is the life I want to create? And how can I now program myself in with new beliefs that actually allow me to be, they're in alignment. These beliefs are now in alignment with what I want to create. And something that for anyone listening at a starting point, the first thing you can start doing in your own life is really observing, like, are there areas of life that maybe aren't great and you want to, do better in or change, or maybe there's an area that's good, but it can be amazing. It can work both ways. It doesn't have to mean you're in a rock bottom or a really challenging place or a stuck place. It can be, but it can also be taking it to the next level. And so just observe your life, because everything outside of us is a mirror of our internal thoughts, our internal subconscious beliefs. And so maybe you're doing really amazing in your career aspect, but your relationships, maybe there are no relationships, or you don't have a romantic relationship and you desire that. Start looking around to see what is being mirrored out to you. And then it can be a good starting place to see where you want to dive deeper. So I love that you were able to kind of crack in there. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, it was the piece that you mentioned about really following curiosity. Like I am
Mm-hmm.
a big fan of that. I've always been that way. I've been like, I think sometimes I've been like the one that asks a lot of questions, and
Yeah.
that can annoy some people, especially like when you're in school or like just trying to understand something. But
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, following my curiosity has led me to very amazing places. So I think it'd be really cool to hear a little bit more about maybe earlier on in your journey, you followed your curiosity through travel, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
through um backpacking. Do I have it?
Yeah, travel has always been such, gosh, I would say it's just like a woven, it's part of like my woven tapestry, it's just a thread that's always there. Starting from a young age, on my mom's side, my family immigrated from Guatemala. And so I'm first generation born on my mom's side. And growing up, my mom would often take my sister and I to Guatemala every couple of years to visit family. And so that already was like planted in me, like, wow, going on a plane and traveling and just being able to do that, even though we weren't always doing touristy things. It was more about seeing family and stuff like that. It still really planted a seed. And then when I graduated from undergrad, I studied in psychology and I got my master's in psychology. But right after undergrad, I went on a field study in Costa Rica, and I was working in group homes and orphanages because I had really emphasized developmental psychology. I loved working with children. And so as I was there, I also got to see the Peace Corps and, just be really exposed to humanitarian work and aid work. And that planted another seed. And that's actually what pivoted me into nursing, because I thought, I had a professor that I really loved, and I had already gotten my master's in psych, and he had a PhD, and he was, a practicing child therapist as well as a lecturer. And he knew I loved to travel and I really wanted to live abroad or internationally at some point. And he said, well, maybe you don't really need to get your PhD, because that was the route I was on. And it really allowed me to think like, yeah, is that the route I want to go, or am I just kind of going on it? And so I sat with it and I realized, actually, I think I would like to do nursing, because it's something that, even though it has its own cultural implications, it can be more transferable to all over the world versus psychology. It's still extremely important, but I figured, if someone has a broken arm, no matter what country they're in, we're going to do very similar things to help them. And I thought it was a great way to be able to help people, which was very much in alignment with my core values. I could live anywhere in the world. And so I pivoted to nursing. And that was, even as I had mentioned earlier in our talk, that I knew I wouldn't be in a hospital forever, if at all. I was like, I don't even know if I'll work in a hospital from the beginning. And another piece that was planted in me is my grandma, my mom's side, my Guatemalan grandma. She was always doing really interesting things when I would go to her house as a kid. She'd be juicing or talking about yoga or doing acupuncture. And I was always so intrigued. And so that definitely also planted a seed. And just really, I was always curious about that too. So in nursing school, I would go to acupuncture. There was an acupuncture school close by, and I would go get treated by the students and just really learn about different modalities. So then I really was passionate when I was in nursing school and driven to do Doctors Without Borders and be a nurse in Doctors Without Borders. And that's really kind of what my motivating and driving force was. And I thought, I'm going to live in Africa. I'm going to live in a hut. I had this big vision. And as I finally met all my requirements, you had to work in the hospital for several years. You had to have, certain experiences before you could go out in the field. I did my application and they got back to me saying, it looks amazing. It's very strong, but right now we need French speakers. And I was like, oh, I don't have that. I could do Spanish, I could do English, but I don't have French. And so I really took it as not as a roadblock, which at first I was like, oh, I've been doing everything to get up into this point, but it was like a redirection. And I really trusted at that time. I had been already on my own spiritual path and kind of doing my own self growth work already, and thought, okay, for whatever reason, I'm being pivoted. And that was a really big year for me. A lot of things kept happening. My grandma passed away that year. A cousin passed away, a lot of really big traumatic things. And I decided, coming back to the travel piece, I'm going to travel on my own in Central America, really just freeing, connect back to myself, reestablish, reorient, reground myself, get some clarity, because everything had been kind of up in the air. So I decided to go to El Salvador, Guatemala, Nicaragua. I knew someone in El Salvador. I had a friend. Her and I met in Haiti doing volunteer work. So I started the trip visiting her. And then I was pretty much on my own. I did see family a little bit in Guatemala, but this trip was so impactful. And honestly, it's like a before that trip and an after that trip. And I ended up being there for 9 weeks, and having that space, having that time for myself, being in nature, traveling just really replenishes my soul, meeting other people, being expanded in so many ways. And that's when I had the vision, you know what? One day I would love to do retreats. I would love to be more in the wellness space, but I was still working in the hospital full time. I had no idea how I would get from where I was to where I wanted to go. And that was back in 2017. And then when I got back from that trip, I knew that something was about to change. Maybe I'd move or something pivotal would happen. And I went up to San Francisco to visit a friend. And as we were there, we were walking, and she said, why don't you move here? You always love Northern California. And as she said it, I was like, that is exactly it. And so I just, again, like was open, followed my curiosity. I put in a transfer for the hospital. It happened very quickly. I moved. And as I was there, I was like, this is my time to adopt travel Tosh mindset while I'm living in a city that I know, but I don't know super well. Like I'd been there many times, but now was going to be living there. So I would go to all the yoga classes. I joined a meditation studio. And after the first time going to the meditation studio, I had this other vision, like I would love to teach meditation. And so I just really followed my curiosity and followed this thread and started coaching people. I already had this reputation in the hospital in Southern California of being known as kind of like the wellness nurse, and people first would say like, oh, what are you eating? You're eating so many vegetables and fruits. And then they would say, so how do you make that? They would start asking me. And so really it was just following the things that made me feel happy, that made me feel good, and just putting my energy there. And again, back to that alignment piece, really following my authenticity and the things that allowed me to feel so happy, so joyous, and tap into that fun. That was often the missing piece because I thought work had to be so hard. So that's a little bit.
Yeah. And I love what you said about there was like a before that trip and an after that trip, because
Yes.
like it's like we never know when those moments are going to happen, the before and after, but I definitely think those are like pivotal time periods that then when we look back on, obviously like in hindsight, we're like, oh, that's where maybe where the creation started or the inspiration started, right? Like you said, for like maybe doing retreats.
Yes.
So I love that you shared that, just like the way that you've been able to nurture a new life or like your future self into being like from the present. It's so awesome. And I hope that listeners can take that away, that like you're able to create your life from, that's like a big part of this podcast is just understanding that you are a creator. Like you don't have
Mm-hmm.
to, like, it's not necessarily that you need to like paint or do music to create. Like creating
Right.
is like an everyday thing in every moment.
Mm-hmm.
And taking back, as we talked about a little bit throughout this, like taking your power back, right?
Yes.
Of your power to create and to make make choices differently or in a way that your future self will thank you for.
I love that. And I love what you said too about we're all creative, because I know, at least for me growing up, I often would think, oh, I'm not creative. I have to be a painter or make ceramics or something, in that nature. But I really do think we're all creative, and it's just a matter of really tapping into that flow. And I think for me, creativity really shows up when you almost lose sense of time. It's like, what's that activity or that thing, or how are you showing up when you're almost unaware that time exists? It could be like, for me, some of those ways are when I'm working with my clients, doing a hypnosis with them, or, creating a meditation, being in nature, traveling, meeting new people. I mean, those are all flow. And it doesn't have to just be you created, you sewed something, or those are all great ways too, but it can be so much more. And beyond that, it can be cooking. There's so many ways that creativity can show up.
Yeah, I definitely want that to be like a key takeaway for sure. Before we close, I'd love to
Yeah.
know what's inspiring you offering wise right now. Is there anything that you are sharing with the world, or how can people find you?
Yeah, thanks for asking. People can find me either on my website, which is thenurturednurse.co, or I am pretty active, except for the weekends, on Instagram, and I'm at the Nurtured Nurse. And yeah, I think right now I'm most excited. I love all of my offerings, but I'm most excited about my hypno sessions because they are quite unique. I also infuse them with Reiki. So when clients come in, they have an energetic clearing as well. I check in with their chakra system, see where they might be holding stuck energy, stuck emotion, where they might be out of misalignment. We clear that. We go into the subconscious, whether they're feeling stuck or blocked in an area, or again, like they're already in a good space, but they want to call in even more or go to the next level. I just love working with clients in that way. I even think of it as, we think of Olympic athletes, they have coaches that they use, they visualize, they get clear on what their goal is. And so these sessions are basically subconscious manifestation. So allowing you to create whatever it is that is aligned with you, that is your authentic code, that allows you to really live your dream life as defined by you, not by anybody else. Your dream life might be living on a farm. It might be, living, who knows, in a city. It might be living in a place where you're the only one there, like off grid, but whatever that means to you. So really helping people create that for themselves. And that is really, really so exciting for me. I love it. I get really lit up by that, but that's for me, my most exciting offering right now. I love doing my hypno sessions, and you can find that in the link in my bio on Instagram or my website.
Yeah, so yeah, those are, you can do them virtual or in person, right, where you are.
Both. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. If you're in Southern California, I do offer in person, and then I'm mainly virtual as well. So anyone, anywhere can access me.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I'll link it all in the show notes for those that prefer a kind of a written way of seeing things. So thank
Yeah,
you so
sounds
much,
good.
Tash, for being on. I appreciate you.
Yes. Thank you for having me. I love getting to talk with you.
Yeah. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
Oh, and one more thing before you go. I wanted to let you in on something that I'm offering soon. The Artist's Way is the book that really kicked off this journey for me, and I'd like to pay it forward by facilitating a creative cluster once per year. This is a 12-week process that is intended to teach people to process and transform life through acts of creativity. I wish I would have had a group to go on this journey with when I did the book, and I would love for you to join me. Winter is the perfect time to go inward and reflect. There will be maximum 4 spots in order to keep it intimate. We start January 15th. For more information and application, please DM me on Instagram. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I hope you learned something new and embrace being the student of your own life until the time we meet again. If you'd like a way to support the show and to hear more of this content, it means so much to me for you to take a few minutes out of your day to leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'd love to stay connected with you on Instagram or TikTok at Adriana Goes Creative. You can find me and hit follow while you're feeling inspired right after listening to the show. I can't wait to get a DM from you hearing what you loved about it and what you desire to hear more of. I appreciate each and every one of you so much. I'll talk to you soon. This podcast is for entertainment and general informational purposes only. I am not a licensed healthcare professional, and this podcast is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a physician or other qualified professional.